Today on Yellowstone Teton's Traveled podcast.
That's where the castle where Queen Mary was held prisoner. It's this famous castle. It's on an island in the middle of Loch Leven. And I looked over at it. I'm like, can we go there? And he's like, yeah. Rode over to it, and I was like, oh my God, this is in the history books. So, that's one of the cool things about Europe is you look around and there's all this crazy stuff.
A great story from Pete Erickson and a little history of Western Europe. We are traveling to one of the great Western trout rivers in the United States by way of Italy and a gold medal. Welcome to Traveled, where it's all about the journey we are on in fly fishing and in life. This is our chance to take a deep dive into a specific area around the country so you have a better feel for the people, the resources, and the community that make this part of the country so unique. Before we jump into it today, I wanted to share a big special Traveled giveaway we have going on right now that's just kicked off. You can win a trip to the Euro Nymphing School with Pete Erickson and Bret Bishop and some other amazing anglers, so you can up your Euro game this year. We're also giving away a Echo Shadow X rod, a huge prize pack. This is going to be a big event. It's going on right now. You can head over to wetflyswing.com/giveaway and you can enter this right now. And there's a link in the show notes to check that out. I'll also be heading there this year on this trip. So if you want to check out and actually purchase a slot for this, you can go to dave@wetflyswing.com right now, and we're going to have 10 slots available this year. So if you want to get one of these, you can enter the giveaway, but if you want to purchase that, connect with me as soon as you can, and we'll save you a spot for the Euro Nymphing School. I hope to see you in Eastern Idaho this year for a chance to fish one of the great trout rivers in the country, learn from some of the best we have in this country, and to hang out with yours truly on the river. Okay, before we jump into it with our guest and dig in with Pete here, I want to share the love with our Traveled sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by Swing Outdoors and the Wet Fly Swing podcast. If you're traveling to this neck of the woods and you get a chance to visit a hotel, lodge, or any other business connected in Eastern Idaho or in that region, go ahead and let them know you heard about them through this podcast. And if you get a chance, you can also head over to wetflyswing.com/Teton and see that full list over there at Teton. All right, this week, Pete Erickson is here to break down the Euro Nymphing School with a focus on the South Fork of the Snake, the Henry's Fork, and some of the other great rivers in this part of the area. Pete gives us his update since episode 118. It's been a while, and we find out what Team USA has been up to, how that gold medal came to be, and we hear about that story, and then we find out how we're going to be learning some of these tips and tricks from the gold medal winner on our upcoming trip. We also dig into a little of the history on Euro nymphing and find out how you can up your game with this big trip and prize pack we got going right now. So before we get into it, just want to give you a heads up, wetflyswing.com/giveaway. There's a link in the show notes for your chance to win a slot to this trip. We're giving away one chance to win, and then you're also going to win a big prize pack. So let's check it out. Let's jump into this right now. Time to experience the road less traveled, Euro style. Here we go. Pete Erickson.
How's it going, Pete?
Good, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for putting this together. We've been talking behind the scenes a little bit, putting together the Euro Nymphing School, this cool program we have going, and we've got a good cast of people on board and experts, and we'll talk about that. We're going to dig into that today, and we're going to help people get educated on Euro nymphing a little more today. But take us back real quick. We're going to go back because it was episode 118 when we had you on back in January of 2020, just before COVID started. And so what have you been doing since then? Take us back. So over the last few years.
English teacher, ninth grade English teacher in Boise. So that takes up a lot of my time. I've also been lucky enough to travel, doing a lot of fishing stuff, host guiding, and the Team USA thing has been pretty fun. Been to, since 2020, because we got shut down on a couple tournaments. We went to Czech Republic. That was awesome. And then Italy.
Oh, yeah.
Italy was just this last summer, and we were able to win the world championship as a team.
Oh, wow. That's right.
Yeah. And Bret Bishop won the individual world championship. It was amazing. Where else have I been? I've been to Argentina twice, Patagonia, and just lucky to travel a little bit, and everything's kind of opening up. And yeah, fishing's kind of getting back in the swing.
That's cool. How have you always done that? Because you have the teaching. How has that been as far as balancing? You're traveling all these places, plus you got, it seems like a lot going on. How have you been able to do that? What's the secret?
It's been precarious, actually. There's no secret. Begging my principal to, let me get a sub and use sick days, and trying to time these things around vacation, spring break, Christmas break, and then summers. I mean, summers do open it up a little bit. So if a world championships are during the summer, it really helps. So it's actually pretty precarious operation.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. Well, I'll put a link out there to that last episode we did. And it was so long ago, I can't even remember what we talked about. I know we dug into Euro nymphing, so we'll have a little bit of that today. But you mentioned Italy, which was the gold. That's where you guys won the gold?
Yeah, it's something that the adult teams have never been able to do. The youth team has won gold, but the adult team, it's been this quest and for the cut,
Yeah.
It's like the holy grail that we were trying to do. And, you got the senior team and the masters team, and we've both been gunning for that thing. And to be honest with you, when I was planning for Italy as a captain, in my mind, I was kind of like, man, I hope we medal. The Italians, I don't know if they've ever lost, on their home turf. And our guide, Stefano, he was like, look, these guys have been coming to this water every weekend, this year to prep for this. And they're all such great anglers, and there's a bunch of past world champions on the team and everything. And as it was coming together, we were just fishing really well and understanding everything. And a lot of that is credit to our guide, who's amazing. And, all of a sudden we found ourselves kind of like, hey, wait a minute, we're in second place after day one. And heck, after the third day, we're in first place. Like, what's going on here? We're all fishing really well, and we're all working together as a team, which is the biggest part of this stuff. And, it just all came together. It was kind of awesome. It was kind of magical.
Wow. And you guys took it home. And Bret, we had Bret on a while back. He talked about winning that. So I'll put a link out to that episode as well.
Oh, good.
And so, so you guys have the first ever gold for the adults. So I guess it's the guys down below. So what is the team? So you guys are is it the masters?
Masters, yeah. And Bret's the captain of the senior team. And all of us have been on that team too for many, many years. So,
yeah.
But it was really cool because, each country you go to, the Euro style nymphing, I would say, it's different. You have to completely recalibrate, and figure out it's always about the river and the fish.
Does it look like, you go to the European countries and you find that the places where it's harder to catch fish, those are the better teams typically over in Europe, like Italy, is that kind of how it works?
100%. It's exactly like skiing. The iciest, hardest, places is where the best skiers come from, best racers.
Right.
And it's just because they're trained, it's so fun to see those people from Italy, especially the competitors, but just your average, European angler too. If you see them over in Idaho or something, and I've accidentally bumped into the French team before on the Henry's Fork.
Oh, wow. The whole team?
I'm like, oh my God, I know you guys. And it's just, they can't believe how awesome the fishing is. It's like Shangri-La for them.
Oh, wow. So they come over here and they're just going crazy.
Yeah. And, the same thing, other parts of the world too are awesome fishing too. But Europe can be just so challenging. Those fish are pressured, and, believe it or not, there's a lot of wild trout and wild grayling, and we had marble trout in this one too. So that was something that I've never really focused on, marble trout. And they're different. It was like, okay, these things are different to catch than, I know browns and grayling really well, but wow.
Okay. What are the marble trout? What do they look like? What are they connected to?
They're just they're big and they're beautifully colored. They kind of look like a tiger trout.
Okay.
If you know what that looks like. And yeah, they're just, they're aggressive, and they hang in certain types of water, and it's just, they're different, the funny part is when you're prepping for your section, usually, it's all sealed envelope, so you don't know what section you're going to get at, but you prep for every section that you might possibly get. And so, oh, I got beat number 6. There's a bunch of marble trout on there. And so, you kind of know what you have to do. You're like, okay, I have to fish differently than if this were a heavy wild brown trout section.
Gotcha.
That's part of the fun of what we get to do. because you're in all these different places. You're not just going to the same rivers that you go to all the time. Like I do in Idaho, I go to the same rivers,
Right. Yeah, these are totally different. And these rivers, did you guys fish them a little bit before you actually started the competition?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We have sometimes a couple weeks of practice. And the guide's like teaching us, and we're trying to dial it in ourselves and find our confidence. And then there's, as a captain, I do like a whole year's worth of research on all the entomology and the Creole census and all, like everything, try to figure everything out and what's going to happen. And if it's high water, if it's low water, if it's raining, if it's sunny, all those different deals. It makes it really challenging and really fun.
That's it. So what do you think was the secret to you guys winning the goal? Was it mostly nymphing?
It was a combination because, some rivers were dry dropper, some rivers were dry fly, and there was a lot of nymphing. We kind of had that glacial flower, rivers, like on the Sarka and stuff like that. So, you probably fished in the Northwest for steelhead, and you know what glacial flower.
No, what is the glacial? You mean just like a tint till? So
glacial flower is like it's that lime green that comes from the glaciers, like it's coming out of the mountains, and so you're like, I can't see very far into this, which was really cool, right? Because you walk up and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at the color of this river. It's lime green.
Yeah.
And it's because it's the Dolomites, right? You're coming off of its runoff, and it just makes things completely different, as far as how you prep for colors of the flies, basically everything, and you can't really see when you're waiting on, like, that was the Sarka River that I was referring to right there. But it's, you just like all these different aspects come into play.
Right. So the stuff you guys did over in Italy, let's take it back over here because we're going to be hitting probably like the Henry's Fork or the South Fork Snake, some of those rivers. Are there any similarities between the two, Italy versus this stuff over here we're going to be hitting?
Yeah, tons, and that's one of the reasons that we're able to prep and practice in the Rocky Mountains, because there's so many similarities between these types of rivers. Europe is distinctly unique in a lot of its river systems, but let's say, for example, the South Fork, it kind of has everything. It's just like one of those places that has, it has the thin shelves. It has the freestone side channels. It has, like, there's all these different things that you can do. It's so diverse. And that's why I've spent a lot of time on the South Fork of the Boise, South Fork of the Snake. It's easy to find the style of practice if you know what the river is in Europe. And that's why it's just so fun to Euro nymph the South Fork of the Snake. It's just huge, and there's so much to do.
Right.
And in October, the wading is going to be very accessible.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You can wander all around.
What is going on during October?
The water levels are just down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fish are concentrated in holes, which makes, Euro nymphing awesome.
Oh, really? Okay. And can you fish year round on, the South Fork, like Euro nymph, you can kind of do that year round?
Yep, absolutely. And there's whitefish that you can target and practice on. Sometimes we would practice on whitefish because they had similar mouths and stuff to grayling. So, and when people are learning how to Euro nymph, sometimes they're like, okay, here's a hole right here, and there's whitefish in it,
which are great. Mountain whitefish.
Yeah, it's like, I'm gonna practice this deal. As guides, sometimes we poo-poo the whitefish, but if you're practicing Euro nymphing, sometimes you get your set right, you get your sighter, you get lined up, you get figured out, and whitefish might be a little dumber than trout, but they still play the game, and when you're learning, it's kind of nice because you're fighting fish, you're setting fish.
Yeah, just hooking, fighting a fish. Yeah, you're hooking stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the game. So the South Fork, if we're looking at that, maybe we could talk about, how because you have this master's in education, you're a teacher, you've got those skills. Take us to your program. Like, if you're, we're going to be doing this is part of, like, teaching. Somebody's going to be listening. Probably they might be new to Euro nymphing. Maybe they haven't done it at all. What does your program look like? How do you start people out, from square one in this stuff?
Yeah, you kind of do presentations either in the morning or at night. It could be PowerPoint. It could be showing videos. It could be a kind of group discussion. And that's always the educational part of it, to get everyone kind of like the big picture of everything. The other thing too that people find really engaging is you'll have like sessions where, like, hey, let's all build ourselves leaders, and of course, like, Bret and I might guide that process and kind of maybe show a few slides on the materials and just the different like leader theories and things like that. What's most, the most modern techniques that are happening, most contemporary. And then, that's kind of cool to have, you're doing it yourself, you're building your own leader, and you're kind of armed and ready to go out there. So there's that. You can kind of go over the fly boxes. And then obviously there's, time on the river.
Yeah.
That part is, it's key. And so you kind of mix those together and you get a nice little clinic. And then I'm a big teacher that believes in guided discovery. So, like I like to let people kind of figure, not do it on their own, but like kind of pay attention to them and see them kind of break through different plateaus and stuff. I'm just kind of like, what are you thinking? It's really seems to work pretty well in a lot of these clinics to let people kind of explore and guide them, let them explore, figure it out, and have some fun, really. I mean, one thing that people seem to, they kind of discount fishing when it comes to Euro nymphing. It's almost like this like system of almost like gill netting fish or something, like that.
Oh, right. Like it's too easy.
It's so not like that. There's so many elements of being a fly fisherman, like an angler. Like once you figure out kind of your basics and everything, you move into fishing mode. You start looking for water and you start figuring out things and you start figuring out your presentations and adjusting. And seriously, it's just as much fly fishing as far as all your adjustments and everything as, dry dropper fishing or any other style, streamer fishing.
Yeah, I love it. I love that it's called, essentially, I mean, there's different names for it, dynamic nymphing, mono, whatever. But I love that it's mostly called Euro nymphing because it's almost like right, we're in the U.S. here, but we have people that listen around the world. But it's perfect because, I mean, that's how it started, right? I mean, the European nymphing.
Well, I think you and I talked about that in our last episode, but I can't really remember. But, I mean, it's kind of a dubious thing that we, I think I told you the story where
we dubbed it. Yeah.
Did you? Yeah, where we were talking like Jack Dennis had 10 different countries listed on his presentation. And we were like, Jack, just shorten it to, don't call it Polish, Czech, French, and Spanish nymphing, the title slide of your presentation. That's too much. Just call it European.
Yeah. So you and who was there when they came up with the European?
Oh, Courier. And I think we were in Laramie, another guy named Sam. I can't remember who was all there, but it was some Team USA guys. And we were like part of Jack's presentation. And it wasn't long after that Jack and myself and Vladi put out the first European nymphing video, like the Cabela's one. It was the very first one. And it was like,
oh, really? The Cabela's one?
Yeah, it's like super old. But it was perfect because Jack's like, yeah, I'm going to call this thing the European nymphing,
There you go. So Jack Dennis, I mean, he was there, right? Because he was the captain, or he was the captain?
He was. Yeah, he was a big driver and all this stuff and organized everything and just a lot of vision on all that stuff. And I remember the first few times that like Vladi was kind of wondering, like, why isn't this called Polish nymphing? Like this DVD that we're making. And no matter where you went in Europe, they're like, wait, this is called Czech nymphing, and it was like very, they were very proprietary. And it's just like Americans to throw a big general name on something, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But that's the first time I've ever heard the term when we kind of shorten it down. And I always tell people somebody concurrently could have, called it that too. Who knows?
Yeah. But you guys were there. But the bottom line, you were there. Dennis, I mean, Jack Dennis was the man. He got this going at the start. And so you guys were there at the beginning with Jack.
Yeah, it was pretty early on in the whole process. So who knows?
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, but the Euro nymphing has kind of stuck, and it does kind of make sense. I think it's important to kind of clarify that all these techniques individually, parts of them and stuff have existed forever, for decades. And they're, people will say, my great granddad was high sticking in Colorado in the 1700s, or what, you just hear stuff that's like, well, of course, everyone's been doing everything. It's just like flies, if someone comes up with a fly, it's like, all those elements have been around for decades. And so I think Euro nymphing it was all those things coming together for those people during those competitions in the 80s. And it kind of clicked as a thing, with the flies, with the long light rods, with all that stuff. It kind of clicked as a technique and a thing and a whole, something that was identifiable. So that's why I think it's okay to call it something.
Yeah, no, I think it's perfect. It actually is good. Well, I want to dig into a little bit on the gear because we've got the cool thing we're doing here is that we're doing this school, but we're giving away a trip, which is pretty amazing. So we're going to give away, somebody's going to win this trip, but not only are they going to win a trip, we got a bunch of gear, including a Echo Shadow X rod and a bunch of other, like over 10 other companies giving away products. So I'll give a shout out to that at wetflyswing.com/giveaway, where we're going to be have one lucky winner. But let's talk about the gear. Let's go into that real quick. So I know last time we talked about Echo.
Oh, yeah.
Bring us back. So what is has anything changed since then? Talk about your gear. Like if you're going out there just focusing on Euro nymphing, what are you bringing out there?
Well, like, early on too, we were using whatever rods we could find because there were no specific long light rods. There were no 10-foot 3-weights or anything like that way back when. So you can do Euro nymphing with a 9-foot 5-weight. It's just such an obvious difference if you use a 10.5-foot 3-weight. It's just amazing, reach and your ability to lead your flies or, whatever it is, like setting, fighting fish. There's so many different things that these rods can do. The micro leaders, which are really long leaders that are very thin, the jig hooks, the bead heads, all these things kind of come together in that fashion. Yeah. And I remember we talked about, of course, the Echo Shadow X is my favorite rod, right?
Right. That's right. But there's a bunch, right? There's a bunch of good rods out there probably.
Oh, there's so many really good rods out there because obviously I, as a rod designer, I'm trying rods all the time and I'm incredibly impressed with a lot of the rods in the industry right now.
Gotcha. So 10.5-foot 3-weight is the rod that you use.
That's the one I prefer. That's the one, we all used, and maybe 10-foot 3 too. But when we were in Czech Republic, with heavy cover and smaller fish, we use 10-foot 2-weights, and sometimes you go down to a 9.5-foot rod. But yeah, just the combination of long and light is a big part of it. And the biggest test you can give anybody is you run them through these clinics, you let them use the long light rods, and they start getting used to it. And you say, okay, here's your 8.5-foot 5-weight.
Right. Here's your old heavy rod.
And they just, they just feel like a eunuch.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to go back. That's right. What about the lines? Have the lines changed over the last few years with the Euro nymphing lines? Do you even need a line, Roy? Because you're not really using a line, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the rules for FIPS-MOOSH have encouraged that you're using line outside of the rod, pushing it a little more towards traditional fly fishing. So the leaders can no longer they can only be twice the rod length now. And so that's all the mono you get. And so you will, if you're reaching across a river or trying to find a spot, you're fishing with fly line. And it depends on the angler, but some of us will hybridize our situation and we'll cast a Euro nymph line with a dry dropper in a pinch. So yeah, we actually kind of use the lines a little bit more than people think.
Yeah. And what are the lines? Does everybody have a Euro nymphing line out there now?
Yep. They all have and they're very thin, very light, and they're a certain diameter they have to be for the rules. And one of the reasons they're so light and thin is they're not heavy, so they don't cause line sag. And what line sag is just like if you're reaching out and you've got a drift going, if your line's heavy, the line will start to fall in between the guides and it'll pull your nymphs towards you.
Oh, wow.
So that's one of the reasons that all these lines are so thin. And you'll notice it when you get one. You'll be like, whoa, this looks like running line.
That's what I was going to say, running line, exactly. Yeah. Or even backing.
It's covered in it. It's traditional fly line covering. But
yeah, gotcha. Do you have like a brand that you use typically?
I've actually used Airflo and RIO. The lines can be kind of similar. You can go down deep rabbit holes with these lines on their cores and all that stuff, but durability. But they are kind of similar the way they're constructed, a lot of them. And they're just like, let's say that you're starting this clinic, you're going to look at it and go, wow, that doesn't look normal. This is very thin. It's not built like a traditional trout taper, trout line, which, that would be one of the goals of our clinic is to let people know, like, here's why this line looks like this. And here's the benefits of it. Here's why you need one.
Yeah. And that's what we'll dig into too, right? At this school is like, how do you cast this thing and what does that look like?
Yeah, all the casting is very kind of unique with a lot of the Euro nymphing techniques. There's lobs, and then there's you just have to figure out how to work the rod. all these are techniques that have, they've kind of been refined. One of the really cool things about, doing a Euro nymphing course is that when you do it, it's kind of a freeze frame in time. Things change so fast in this deal that it's very dynamic, and you'll learn what is, well, like with Bret and I and the other guys, you'll learn what is actually, kind of happening on the scene right now. But it changes fast.
Right.
Which is what I love about being on the competition scene.
Exactly. I think that's one of the cool things about having you and Bret and the other folks we're going to have on this is that, yeah, we'll have a connection with you guys. And as things changes, we can keep up with you, right? Well, where is Team USA right now? So let's take a break there. So is that on coming up here? Where's that at?
Oh, like the Masters, we're going to try to defend our championship up in Kamloops, BC. And that's in September.
Oh, it's in September. Oh, this might be something I might have to make up there.
Yeah, it's up in Kamloops is kind of quite the drive, but not too bad. And that's where I grew up fishing.
Oh, it's in Kamloops, actually, in the town of Kamloops.
It's around there. Yeah, it's different lakes. Yeah, and there's 2 rivers too. So Kamloops is known for its stillwater fishing.
Yeah, big trout, big rainbow. Are you guys going to catch some trophies? Is that the thought?
What's that? Trophies?
Yeah, you're going to find some big fish?
Oh yeah, there's huge fish up there. It's awesome. And pretty sure that's where I caught my first trout when I was, 6-7 years old. So I grew up in Seattle, but my dad was obsessed with that area, and we went up there like almost every other weekend growing up.
Wow. So can people go to this thing? Could people actually go watch the event?
Yeah, you can go. I mean, you'd be on the bank watching boat. It's mostly lock style fishing, but yeah, that's the fun part. And you can always hang out in the hotel and hang out with everybody, and you can learn a lot. Like I know people who wanted to get in the competition scene. Sometimes they'll go to a world championship or a national championship, and they'll just kind of soak it all in and figure out and talk to people. And everyone's really nice and let you know what's going on. You can learn a lot about the fishing techniques and everything. And lock style fishing is awesome.
Yeah, I know. I want to learn about that. We've talked a little bit about that over the years, but I mean, that's just such a big, it sounds like, yeah, I mean, why? Let's just dig in that just for a second. I mean, why is the lock style? It's basically throwing out the drogue right there, and you kind of let the drogue slowly pull you down. So you're not trolling, you're actually fishing. Yeah.
They have drifts. And there's, within given lakes, there's drifts that are obvious, and they're kind of almost traditional, because the winds blow a certain way. I remember in Scotland back in a long time ago, 2009, I guess, I saw this map in this pub outside Loch Leven, and the drifts had been named, like 100 years ago. Like the drifts were named on this map, and it was so cool.
And by drifts, you mean just the wind is so common, the same type of wind and area that it's always the same?
Well, what you do is you would, I don't know what they did way back when. They probably rode, but you have little 5 or 10 horses on there, depending on the size of the boat. Loch Leven had big boats, so maybe a little bit bigger motors. And you go set up on the drift at the top of it, and the wind's blowing a certain way, and you drift the whole way all the way to the shore of the other side of the lake, and the boats will line up, so you get in behind people. And
oh wow, so you're in just a lineup of boats.
Yeah, and the drift just takes everyone through there.
What happens when you catch a fish, and how do you follow the fish? You get out of your line, or you just stay drifting?
Yeah, you just keep drifting and bring it in. Yeah, you're not drifted. It depends. I mean, if the wind's howling. The boats on Loch Leven, I think, didn't have drogues because they were so awesome traditional heavy boats.
Oh, right. Didn't even need them.
That they didn't get pushed hard in the wind. Yeah. And you had a gilly in the middle that had oars, and he kept the boat grabbing. They were huge boats.
Yeah. Like how long? Roughly?
I can't remember how long they were.
Much bigger than a drift boat.
Way bigger. I was pretty far away from the other angler. And they were white. It's kind of fun. You can go to Loch Leven and go, Google it and type in images, and you'll see the boats. They're old. They've been there forever. And they were the best boat that I've ever lake fished out of. Wow. They were really cool.
What do they call it? If we had to look up on Google, would there be a style of boat? What do you think they'd be called?
Well, I don't know if it's called clink style. I think these boats were almost considered like Loch Leven style. I don't know. All the people I know in Scotland are probably mad at me right now for messing. Yeah. But it's very important, to get all this stuff right. But I mean, it was a long time ago for me. I just remember being in this boat. It didn't crab. It drifted perfectly. and it was stable, and it was just like I had a lot of room in the boat, and I was like, wow, this is what it's all about, this boat right here. So if I go out in my drift boat, sometimes it'll crab back and forth, and it'll move too fast, and drift boats are made for rivers, and so but these boats, I was like, wow, this is awesome. You're low to the water.
There you go. Cool. Nice.
Yeah, so I mean, some of that stuff is the cool things that you learn, when you go over and participate in something that's been around forever.
Oh, I love that. That's got to be a big part of, I mean, that, right? The history is pretty cool on this. You get that history piece. Do you enjoy digging into that, hearing all the history of the European stuff?
Oh, 100%. I remember, I mean, that's where the castle where Queen Mary was like held prisoner.
Oh, wow.
It's this famous castle. It's on an island in the middle of Loch Leven. And I looked over at it. I'm like, can we go there? And he's like, yeah.
Nice.
Rode over to it, and I was like, oh my God, this is in the, the history books. So, that's one of the cool things about Europe is you look around and there's all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, it is. The history is huge. Nice. Well, let's take it back into we were talking on a while back on just the course. Let's think of, we're putting this together, it's day one, people are arriving, and this is going to be kind of a multi-day deal here. And we could probably do the coursework the night before. Let's just take it there. What would be the first start when we're looking at just, all right, we're kind of sitting down, you're going through like a PowerPoint and you got maybe some videos and stuff. Where do you start with the Euro school?
I usually start with, I kind of put the focus on the students that are there and just say, what are you doing right now? How do you catch fish? How do you nymph? What do you think of this? What are your perceptions of this? And we kind of go from there and figure out, we just kind of range find a little bit. And then I usually, pick up what I can from there and kind of try to meet their needs and go into maybe some brief history on it and why they might want to do it and what are some of the big picture advantages to it. And yeah.
Well, what if they said, you asked them that question, they basically said, well, I've done it a few times out there, but it's always been a struggle. I don't really have my gear. It's kind of like the casting was a little tough, didn't catch that many fish or whatever. If that's where they're coming from, where do you start? Do you start differently than if you talk to somebody who was like, oh yeah, I've done this a while, I've got my own gear, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, that's a differentiation mode that I would go into, because obviously if you have enough time in a clinic like this, which you do, you can differentiate the instruction to meet the different levels. And usually what I would say is that even though the people are like, yeah, I've kind of done this for a while and I've got my own Euro nymphing rod, they're usually pretty dialed into saying, oh yeah, I do kind of want to learn about the history of this. And, oftentimes you can kind of find some things that they're like, oh wow, I'm self-taught and I didn't realize that. I think I'm going to go back and maybe, change those knots on my leader or I never knew why that was. And so you can kind of bring both sets in. You can bring a, total beginner in with someone who's intermediate. And then eventually, obviously, even if someone came that was super advanced, we can always find ways to take them to the next level. It's not that hard. It's such a vast amount of information that you can easily differentiate instruction.
Okay, good. And that's going to be the plan because we're going to have, we'll have it hooked up. We'll have multiple guides in there taking people out, and we'll be going to different rivers and, covering that. So, well, let's look at the river. So what do you think would be, we talked about the South Fork, the Henry's Fork. When you talk about that area, that part of Eastern Idaho, what are the places that are really like Euro nymphing? I mean, is it kind of like all of them you can nymph on, or is it a few select ones?
No, it kind of depends on, it's different sections of different rivers, really. The South Fork is pretty consistent, especially at that time of year when the water level's down. You'll be able to, park the boat on an island and you'll have side channels coming down both sides around the island. You'll have holes, drops, like runs. You'll have all these things it's just like a playground for European nymphing and a lot of mobility. Like it's easy wading.
And it's a boat fishing? Are you doing this from a boat or you're floating or are you people walking in?
Well, the European nymphing, most of the time, what you're going to be doing in European nymphing is going from spot to spot and getting out and doing that. And you have so much access. And that time of year too, the river's not really that crowded. So you can go from island to island and you just have endless amounts of holes and runs and stuff that you can do. So like the South Fork is just amazing for European nymphing. I do a lot of it. I have, clients that that's all they want to do. Like they come out in the fall and they're just like, let's just Euro nymph the whole way down, which kind of sounds weird with, like, wait, they're eating some betas over there. It's like, no, I want to see some of the big fish that are at the bottom of this hole.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to do. I want to get like, I feel like just getting it dialed in. You put in 4 days to something with, basically some of the best in the world, right? I mean, that's the idea is that like, that's what I want to do. I want to suck as much information out of you guys as I can, right?
Sure.
That's the idea that you come out of it. And then you add, a little bit of, you could always go back and try it with other things. So you got the South Fork of the Snake and you got, so what are the other rivers that you might Euro nymph out there?
Oh, the Henry's Fork, below Ashton is like a really fun place that we might be able to do depending on water levels. And, it always depends on the water level. It looks like this year is going to be, above the percentage of runoff, but who knows? You never know. We're still pretty in the middle of the winter. So, but yeah, those would be the two that I would prefer. Like I think that you don't want to. There are certain rivers that maybe are like deep, slow-moving pools that just aren't as conducive to Euro nymphing. Of course, you can Euro nymph in any situation, really, but oftentimes there's situations that are a lot better than others.
Gotcha. Okay. So if we're on the Snake and we're floating down, we find a spot. Let's take it to the water a little bit. So you've got your gear, you got your setup. You mentioned the leader. Do you want to break that down really quick? Has that changed much over the years? What does your leader look like?
We'll probably introduce a couple different types of leaders. And this is why I said it's kind of easy to differentiate instruction between beginners and maybe intermediate or advanced. Oftentimes, like Bret and I will build kind of leaders for people who are just getting into it. It makes the casting easier, the lob casting. It makes it more accurate, less tangles. We can go all the way up to our competition micro leaders, which are, if you don't know what you're doing, you can tangle them pretty easy. They're 22 feet long of all the way down to 7x, 8. I mean, in Czech Republic, I fished 9x.
9x?
9x, yeah.
Wow.
It mattered from 8 to 9x. But people are probably laughing at that listening to this. It absolutely 100% mattered. And between 7.5x and 8 mattered, or 7x and 8x totally mattered to the fish. It was crazy. And this is with nymphs. This is not dries. So those leaders, I mean, what we'll be doing is nothing crazy like that. And oftentimes the fish in North America are a little bit bigger. So, that's pretty tough to land a big fish that way. And maybe not even that good for the fish. So we probably go with, 5x, which is still a micro leader. If you got 20 feet, 21-foot leader or 20-foot leader, let's say, for this particular group of people.
So 20-foot leader. And then you have, take us down from, say, the fly line and down. How do you build that?
Well, from the fly line, there's not really like these big butt sections like you would see in a traditional situation. It can taper down, but it'll depend on how much time we want to spend doing these things. But, in competition, we usually do like needle knots and show them all that stuff. You can certainly tie off with a nail knot and it's fine. But yeah, you just go from there and it'll have a slight taper. And then, this is for the micro leader, which is usually what most of us use in competitions these days. That'll just be straight all the way down to tippet rings, right? So you have cider and you have tippet rings.
Yeah. So you'll have like how many feet? So you have like from your fly line down to your first tippet ring of 5x, you might have like 15 feet or something?
You might taper down from 12 to 14 feet and then have a cider of a foot. It kind of depends on which leader we feel is kind of appropriate. And the leaders are a little different depending on the country and depending on the person. But in general, micro leaders kind of like that. It'll be pretty thin. It can be 4x to 5x. Down to the cider, down to the tippet rings. And then oftentimes after the cider tippet ring, you'll see someone go down to 5.5x or 6x or 6.5x or 7x. That would be the last, that would be where the two flies are. And let's say that you're fishing mostly, 2 to 4 feet of water. You might have anywhere from 3 to 5 feet on that. So just depending on, it really depends on the situation. There's generalities that will get you started, but we'll dial it in a little bit closer than just saying, hey, you should go double the depth of the water. We'll kind of dial it in and say, we'll see how fast this water's moving. So that's maybe not going to work right now. Or see the bottom, There's lots of snags and stuff here. It's kind of nice having someone out there that like kind of worked in these leaders and will get you up to speed a little bit faster than if you're out there kind of trying to, trial and error on your own.
Right. So yeah, I mean, the leaders are pretty important, right?
Yep.
I mean, leader or rod, I mean, which one's more important, having the right rod?
God, that's a tough question. Leaders are very, very important. Leaders do so much for presentation, sensitivity, setting. The length of the rods really is important.
It is?
Because of what you need to do. Yeah. Like your reach and how you gather the line. I don't know. I would say leaders and then rods and then flies. The weight of the flies is really important. We'll talk about all that. You have to constantly adjust your weights depending on the depth. And
right. How you do that? So if you got your setup, like we're talking here, you got a 20-foot leader or whatever it is, and you have this little slot, maybe it's a ledge off of a drop and a little, I don't know, a little riffle run or something. How are you knowing you're getting down? Do you let talk about that? How do you know you're at the right level? And when would you change the fly?
You can bounce and touch the bottom. You can feel it. Especially with the sensitivity of, especially like a Shadow X is a very sensitive rod. In my opinion, sensitivity there's a bunch of different things. So like setting the fish, feeling the fish peck at it, bouncing off the bottom, figuring out all these. There's so many different things that obviously sight is the first thing that you'll see in a take, but I think sight and feel kind of mixed together at the highest levels. So, you would try to figure out, like, if you're just starting, you're going to go a little heavier bead heads and stuff and you're going to be on the bottom a little more than you want because it's a better way to learn. You're still going to catch fish. As you get better, you learn to go with lighter flies, because if you have a big, heavy, clunky fly, it's not as attractive to the fish. It can be in certain situations, but usually the lighter the flies. And so one of the things that we'll do in this clinic is we'll teach you how to kind of start progressing toward that. If they're a beginner, like I start them off with a little bit heavier flies, helps their casting, helps with tangles. It kind of helps them feel like they'll bounce the bottom a little bit here and there, and they'll just get the hang of it.
Right. And what is the tip there? So casting, because sometimes you cast these things and it feels kind of weird. I mean,
they're very hard to control.
Yeah, but you're essentially making a normal cast, right?
No, it depends. Like usually what you do is you load the nymphs. I mean, gets kind of like technical, but traditionally when the rods were much more medium flex and they weren't as powerful, the early Euro nymphing rods, you'd kind of like load them and then I call them loaders, but you'd shoot the kind of heavy tapered and very stiff back butt section, like Maxima. You'd shoot that leader and the leader would actually kind of act like a fly line. It would have a loop in it and you'd throw it and it would unfurl your flies for you. Now what's kind of happened is these rods are faster, they have better recovery. They track better. You kind of load back behind you and pause and you almost feel that nymph behind you with the rod and you shoot it to where you want it to go. And that's kind of what's taken place in the last 10 years.
Gotcha. So you're loading, you're just using the water load to shoot it. So you're not doing a bunch of false casts.
No, you don't want to do too much false cast. Yeah. Because it's not a traditional situation. And your fly line, if you are using some fly line out of the end, which you can do depending on how far your reach you need, it's not going to cast like a traditional situation. So you're doing a lot of what I call shooting. And most of the rods at least that I design, and a lot of the rods, it seems like the industry, they're built that way. They're built to load up the weight of the nymph and the bead head and shoot it. So I make a distinction between loaders and shooters,
There you go. Loaders. Well, that Shadow X rod. So that is, I mentioned that earlier. That is something we're giving away. I've already looked at it and I don't have one of my own. We're going to be giving one of these away. What did you put into that rod to make that, how did you design that thing?
Yeah. And there's all these different kind of philosophies about all these rods and stuff. And, there's all these things that help you compete and give you an edge, like downlocking reel seats for balance or single footed guides. Or I remember making a list when I first did the very first Shadow a long time ago, the Shadow PE. And I just made a list of like kind of like dream elements and kind of like begged Tim Rajeff to like, can I do all these things? Or, and of course you can't, but you have to try to find an equilibrium of how much a rod costs to develop and how much it costs to produce. But yeah, like it kind of was a progression all the way to the Shadow X now, which to me, the Shadow X is like, it's super light in hand. It has really good tracking. For me, like I said, sensitivity is actually kind of a big deal to me, even though it's a nebulous term in the industry. For me, sensitivity is actually feeling certain things at the same time of seeing them. Like, so obviously, most of the time when a fish takes, you see the sighter move first, and that's your go-to. But there's also this whole other element of feeling the bottom, feeling fish takes, feeling all these different things. And the Shadow has a few design like kind of strategies that make it, I think, the most sensitive rod out of all of them. It's very light in hand. And so like it was really fun developing that because I got to put it in the hand of a lot of like European competition anglers, and it's Bret's favorite rod, and a lot of, like, I think on our masters team that won in Italy, just about everybody, maybe 4 out of the 5 of us were using Shadows. So that's like a pretty good endorsement, considering that there's a lot of other really great rods out there that everybody has access to. And I even noticed a lot of the Europeans were using them too. So,
oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. And like I said, just very light in hand. The first stripping guide's really close. That's what makes it so fun to design.
What is the single foot? What is the advantage of a single foot guide versus like the double foot?
There's a weight issue, the way they shoot line. There's a whole bunch of advantages to it. And I remember that was one of the first decisions I made with the early Shadow was I'm going to switch to these because all the whatever, there weren't all that many Euro nymphing rods. I think the Shadow PE was like the first 10.5 foot production rod in North America. And so there weren't a lot of them, but what I was trying to do is I was trying to get the right feel and the right action. And Tim suggested like, hey, we can try different guides. They all have different weights and they affect everything. And, I was like, let's try those. And it's funny because it's on most of the rods now, the single foot guide.
Oh, it is. There you go.
Yeah, they're on most of the rods. And it was just kind of like, with Tim's suggestion, because he's a materials engineer and stuff and all that. And he would be like, here, you should try that. He would say, what do you want? What are you after? Yeah, it's just things like that. So, and that, if anyone's thinking about doing this clinic, those are the types of fun things. Like all this stuff is really fun to work with. It's kind of technical and kind of fun, and you can go explore it online and see all the different philosophies. Certainly my philosophies on rod design or what I think is most effective with European nymphing is definitely not necessarily the way to do things. It's just the way that I learned with people that I was around, and I observed people that I really respect, and just kind of you come to your own like conclusion on all that stuff.
Yeah. How much do you think of what you've learned has come from Europeans versus say Americans versus, is it just a mix of everybody, or is there certain people that really influence?
Oh, that's a really good question. Oh, initially, mostly Europeans.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I would say. And then obviously there's Americans from all different, regions of the country that do really cool things, especially the Team USA guys,
Yeah, all the guys from like George Daniel.
Yeah, and we were all there at the beginning. And or you come across a guy like Pat Weiss where you watch him nymph and you're just like, wow, how did you develop that style? That's amazing. And you're kind of all together and you can kind of take little parts of each other's stuff. And, that's one of the things that if you do learn it from some people, you make it your own though. Like you go online, you start watching people and there'll be a lot of conflicting opinions, which I don't see as like kind of frustrating or confusing. I see it as like cool. Like I'm like, oh, so this guy's saying that I should do this. And I've always done it the other way. I'm going to go try that like on the river tomorrow. Like I'm going to go see if what he's saying makes sense to me. And if it does, I've got a new like arrow in my quiver. It's like, that's the way I see it. I love how like multifaceted all the opinions are. And it's great.
Yeah, I agree. What about Tim Rajeff? Has he ever been out there Euro nymphing before?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes. Nice.
Oh, totally. We did a lot of the rod design on Deschutes River and go to his house and with the design team and all that stuff. And yeah.
Well, give us a little breakdown on Tim. What's he like? Because he's kind of He's been a guy I've been trying to, wanting to get on the show here, and it seems like he's a little hard to track down.
Yeah, you should. Well, now he's got a little time because he sold Echo. So.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. He sold Echo. Gotcha.
Yeah, he and Kath are probably cruising around having fun. Tim's just like, he's extremely smart and, obviously world class at everything fishing, especially casting. But he's like, he's very curious and creative. And you can tell that he likes to do stuff. And he'll, especially like when he first contacted me for a lot of this stuff, I think we met at Golden Gate Casting Club, like during a competition. Yeah. And it was like, he's like, I'm curious about that stuff for my company. And I was like, yeah, I'm happy to come up to Vancouver, hang out with you and talk about it. And he's just open-minded and curious about stuff. Like he likes to create things. And that's just how his brain works. And it's fun. It's fun to be around that.
Yeah. That's how you guys did it with the rod. You guys just kind of did you kind of spitball like back and forth on stuff for a while? Like how long did it take you to get the...
I would say that the learning curve was pretty steep on my side, where he kind of had to keep pounding a hammer on my head, trying to tell me certain things can't be done and this and that. And like, he was basically teaching me about materials and rod design and everything in the beginning. That was a long time ago. I can't even remember when the Shadow PE came out, the first one.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It was a long time ago, but eventually I started kind of figuring out the process that he's known forever. And, he's been a rod designer forever, but I think he was at Loomis with his brother, and I don't know his exact history. I think he told me, but he knows everything. And that was the fun part.
We'll work on getting him on, and then we'll have him tell his own story, and we'll get it here. So the drift boat thing. So we're going to be, and I always love the drift boats because I'm like a huge drift boat fan, or just boats in general. But so we're going to be in boats doing that, floating down. So that's different than maybe some other Euro nymphing type schools or clinics. Talk about that a little bit, what that's going to look like.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I call it Cadillac fishing because it's just like you're just eating up, territory.
Covering ground.
Yeah, with our deal, it's not like we drive up to a spot and wade out to one set of islands that we're stuck there for 3 or 4 hours and we got to make it happen. If we don't like a gravel bar or an island or something, we're back in the drift boat. We're moving. And we might even pull out our dry dropper rigs or our Betis dry only fly. We might take advantage of the fact that it's a world-class fishery and fish a few seams or slicks or banks or whatever we want to do, and then find our next European nymphing perfect island. Like, that's awesome.
That's what we're doing. So that's the cool thing about this, is that we have the flexibility, even though, we're coming here for the Euro school, and learn from you guys and to get that dialed in. I mean, we are on one of the great rivers, right? I mean, in the country, and there's a lot of cool stuff going on there. Like, why is that river so well known? You know what I mean? Like the South Fork of the Snake. What makes it so special?
Lots of fish and lots of friendly fish.
Yeah, really. So lots of fish.
Yeah. And the beauty too of the area is unbelievable. And, I always tell everyone cutthroats are lovable.
Oh yeah. Yeah. These are cutties.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously browns and rainbows in there too. Big browns, and big rainbows, but it's just classic, Rocky Mountain fishing. And it usually focuses on dry fly fishing. And that sometimes people are like, how can you possibly Euro nymph right now when you know that there's dry fly action going on? And it's like, well, when you hook a fish within like 10 feet of you, there's this kind of bizarre electrical feeling that happens because it's so close that it's a rush in the same sense as seeing a fish kind of eat a dry fly. It's very visual. Like, you see the fish right away because it's probably, right to the surface. And it's fighting instantly. And that's a rush that until you do it, you don't really realize, like it's that same rush as like seeing a fish come up and taking a fly on the surface, even if that's from a distance. The proximity of, hooking these fish and seeing them and seeing the sighter is very visual. And people don't realize that until they do it.
Yeah, right. It's visual. God, that is cool. So I think that is the beauty, like you said. I mean, the beauty is that we're going to this cool, amazing river. So we are going to be dialing in our Euro game for sure. That's going to be the bulk of what we do, but we are going to be going to a cool place. So that's what I think is what it's all. And that's fishing, right? I mean, as much as we all love catching fish, it is about just being in the cool places, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's not like we're forcing a classic river into a Euro nymphing spot. This is a great Euro nymphing river. Same with the Henry's Fork too. Like you can really Euro nymph well in these rivers.
Perfect. Well, I think I just wanted to touch on the surface today, and just give people kind of, wet their whistle for this sort of thing, because I mean, the giveaway right now we have going, like I said, we've got this trip, we've got all these products, we talked about the rod, but we got reels, we got all sorts of things we're doing. So I'm going to give a shout out there, wetflyswing.com/giveaway for a chance to get in on that. But for those that want to just go on this trip, that's the other opportunity. You can actually just bypass that and book one of these trips with us, and we're going to have limited slots here. So yeah, anything else, Pete, you want to give a shout on this? I mean, for those that haven't been to this part of the area of, Eastern Idaho, what else should we be thinking about before we get there if we're planning that?
Yeah, I mean, Eastern Idaho is just really a mecca of fly fishing. And it's just, if you've never been to it, you really need to, and you're into fly fishing, you got to go once in your life. You really do. It's amazing. And it's just still very rural, and the rivers are beautiful and wild fish. And yeah, it's just awesome.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a perfect way to kind of wrap this thing up. And we're going to circle around later in this week with some other episodes focused on this. And we're probably going to get you back on too. We might even do a fireside chat with Dave on when we do the trip. We might do that. Is there going to be, that's the thing, there's probably an opportunity. We're going to be working with the WorldCast guys. Well, let's give them a shout out real quick, because we're going to be working with the WorldCast. Talk about that group, because I've heard about them before, but I didn't know what they do. So the program, that's the group you kind of work with? Yeah,
I've been working with WorldCast since like the early 90s, believe it or not. The company, it used to be Brestow Outfitters, but it changed into WorldCast, and just unbelievably professional outfit, unbelievable guides, Mike, Chris, everybody who helps run it. It's just awesome. And it couldn't be a better partner than the WorldCast guys for this. I mean, it's awesome.
And they're right there. They have a fly shop, right, in Victor?
Yeah, in Victor. So it's right there. They've carried the shadows, and they might carry other nymphing rods too. You can get a lot of the Euro nymphing stuff in their shop. They're into it. They realize that a lot of people like this style of fishing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I mean, the Euro nymphing, it occasionally gets from some people, right? Whatever. There's always some of that. But I mean, it is a super popular. Do you see that around that it just continues to grow?
Oh, yeah.
It seems like it's been just kind of, yeah.
Well, it's just one of those things where it's just a different style of fishing, and everyone likes to do different styles of fishing, so. Right.
And they like to catch fish.
Yeah. And then, Euro nymphing definitely has a reputation of catching a lot of fish.
Yep. Awesome. All right, Pete, well, I'll leave it there, and we'll definitely circle back around with you for another one of these. And we're going to dig more into probably some of the fishing. And on the next thing we do, I want to actually dig into, just go deep into like what the trip was like, because we're going to do an after trip, right, as well. So we're going to talk about that, and we'll kind of do a wrap up episode. So yeah, until then, we'll send everybody out, I guess, we'll just leave the link to the giveaway for now, and they could always connect with you through the WorldCast guys. Yeah, anything else you want to give a heads up on before we head out of here?
No, just an awesome opportunity to get out there and learn that style of fishing and be in an incredible place.
Right on. All right, Pete, well, thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.
All right, Pete Erickson on travel, part of the Wet Fly Swing podcast and Swing Outdoors. Today's podcast was supported by Eastern Idaho's Yellowstone Teton territory. You can support this podcast in Eastern Idaho by heading to wetflyswing.com/Teton. That's Teton. You can get more information on all the brands and companies you can support there, and find out why this part of the world is so unique, and some of the amazing stuff that we have going on right now over there. Quick reminder before we get out here, don't forget the Euro Nymphing trip giveaway is going on right now. This week it just launched, and we've got a huge grand prize, which is a trip, all expenses paid trip to this school, to our trip to fish this part of the country, South Fork of the Snake. Plus, we're giving away a Shadow X rod and a huge prize pack from all of our sponsors. This is going to be a big one. wetflyswing.com/giveaway. You can head over there right now, sign up for your chance. We're going to be giving this away in about a week, so there's not a lot of time on this one. All right, I'm going to roll. We got a big, very big week. So we got a lot of stuff going on here. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Pete. stay tuned because we're going to be doing another episode with Pete, wrapping up, talking more about the Euro School. So if you get a chance and you can't make it, we are going to be doing a little summary of it. Hopefully we'll have a little fireside chat with Dave on that episode, and we'll talk more about it and provide some more tips and tricks. If you're interested in digging in this year and really getting your nymphing game to the highest level, that's what we're doing here. So we're going to be we're going to be keeping it rolling. So this is the Euro Nymphing Week we got going right now. Glad you had a chance to listen in, and I'm excited. I'm excited to keep digging into this, and I can't wait to get on the water and maybe see you on the water. That would be the best. If I could connect with you on the river and we could do this thing, that would be amazing. But if I can't, check in with me online, dave@wetflyswing.com, and I hope you are having a great morning, a great afternoon, or a great evening, wherever you are in the world. And I look forward to talking to you soon.